Deus ex machina literally means God from the machine. The meaning of the term dates back to ancient Greek stage plays, in which very intricate machines were used to quickly change the stage set to convey dramatic changes to the environment or setting. This was commonly due to some kind of divine intervention in the story being presented, thus the God in the machine. The term has evolved in modern storytelling beyond just the divine to represent almost any far-fetched or unlikely resolution. Examples like Superman turning back time after Lois Lane dies in Superman the movie, the unstoppable alien invaders dropping dead from the common bacteria in War of the Worlds, those f***ing eagles in Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies, and the wormhole aliens, or prophets if you prefer, wiping out the Dominion reinforcements immediately after it looks like Cisco loses his fight with Gul Dukat. Please note that not all Deus ex machinas are necessarily bad. After all, Superman the movie and War of the Worlds, well, the 1953 version anyway, and Lord of the Rings trilogy are all considered classics by modern cinema standards. In the case of War of the Worlds and Lord of the Rings trilogy, they have the excuse of simply following the source material of the novels. However, I do have to say that Superman the movie, while it is considered a classic, back in 1979, there was a certain segment that was in fact very upset to what they considered a cop-out ending. And that's what we want to avoid, the feeling that the writers simply didn't have a satisfactory conclusion, and so they went for a shortcut. And that's what the ending of Sacrifice of Angels feels like, to be frank. The problem is simple. We knew that they had to take back Deep Space Nine in order to continue the series. After all, the series is called Deep Space Nine. We also knew that we couldn't have the Dominion simply continue to pour in endless amounts of reinforcements through the wormhole, so we needed some kind of permanent solution to the situation. Closing the wormhole wasn't going to be an option because the Celestial Temple and the Prophets were a major part of the overarching story of Deep Space Nine. And keeping the minefield in front of the wormhole wasn't really an option because, well, that in essence would be the same thing as simply closing the wormhole, because nobody could go in and out of the wormhole, which means that the Celestial Temple would still have zero access, and no one would ever be able to go to the Delta Quadrant. So, at the end of the day, I ultimately have to agree that the Prophets intervening was the correct choice to make as far as what to do to resolve the situation. Now, I know that may come as something of a shock to you, considering that this series of videos was about a rewrite of Sacrifice of Angels. And so I'm not going to change the fact that the Prophets actually do intervene and stop the Dominion reinforcements from coming through the wormhole. I'm simply going to change some of the events leading up to that event in order to make it a little more telegraphed so that it's not completely out of left field. I'm going to make it more of a journey of faith for Cisco because frankly, well, I've had friends that argue to the contrary, but Cisco shows in this episode that he has zero faith in the Prophets. And the fact is that he should have faith in the Prophets at this point. So let's just rewind a bit and see if we can change the lead up to the Prophets intervening as far as changing dialogue and what can we do to make it make just a little bit more sense. The first scene I want to change is actually not in Sacrifice of Angels. I know that might sound strange because this is a Sacrifice of Angels rewrite, but remember that technically the way that this episode is listed is that the prior episode is called Favor the Bold Part 1, and this episode is called Sacrifice of Angels Part 2. So this is the second part of a two-part episode. And the first scene that I do want to alter is actually in Part 1, Favor the Bold. In the scene, there is a sequence in which Captain Sisko and Admiral Ross meet just before Sisko takes command of the fleet to lead Operation Return. Sisko is at his desk. He sets down a pad and Ross inquires Sisko about the pad, and he tells him,
Ancient Bajoran texts.
The emissary looks for guidance on the eve of battle.
Guidance, insights, loopholes. I'll take anything I can get.
And what did the prophets tell you?
That I have a long way to go before I can make any sense of their prophecies.
The conversation then segues into a conversation about how beautiful Bajor is and how Sisko intends to make Bajor his home. Now, first let me say I'm not suggesting that this is a terrible scene or that Sisko is way out of character or anything. However, for his spiritual journey, I do want to say that I think that this is just the wrong message. And I also think it's just a little bit nihilistic if we combine this with his behavior at the end of Sacrifice of Angels. We'll get to that in a little bit. We're also at this point more than 5 years into Sisko's spiritual journey and almost a full year after his rapture experience. So I do not think that Sisko is going to be quite so dismissive of the prophets or the ancient Bajoran texts at this point. So for this scene, I would change the tone of Sisko quite a bit. When Ross comes in and asks about the pad, the conversation starts the same.
Ancient Bajoran texts.
The emissary looks for guidance on the eve of battle.
Guidance, insights, loopholes. I'll take anything I can get.
And what did the prophets tell you?
This time, however, Sisko talks about the fact that he has seen things that he cannot fully explain, but he knows that there must be a rational explanation. Ross starts to question if Sisko is capable of leading Operation Return, given how much being the emissary means to him. Sisko responds, I don't know what the prophets are, but I do know that they're non-linear beings. To them, the past, the present, the future are all the same. So if they chose me as the emissary, they already know what I would do. So I may not know what I'm supposed to do or what I will do, but I do know one thing. And what is that, Captain? Asks Admiral Ross. 5 years ago, I was ready to resign my commission rather than to take the assignment to Bajor. Today, I would resign my commission rather than give up on Bajor. I consider the Bajorans my people. For whatever reason, the prophets, the wormhole aliens, whatever you want to call them, have chosen me, of all people, to be their emissary. They think that I have a part to play in all of this. And if I do, and if it's a part of this operation, whatever that part is, I intend to play it. Damn, Ben, you almost make me believe. You just might pull this off. Good luck. This change doesn't actually add any new information. It doesn't add anything we haven't seen from Sisko before. But it simply changes Sisko's attitude. Rather than being defeatist and hopeless, Sisko has a sense of purpose and optimism despite the overwhelming odds. In my last video, we talked about how the battle itself will be changed so that the actual battle will be done entirely at warp en route from Starbase 375 to Deep Space Nine, while the Dominion fleet would be defeated by a combination of Federation and Klingon forces. This would ultimately be a bittersweet victory. In the original episode, Rom and his co-conspirators worked against the clock to bring down the station's anti-graviton beam. And when it looked like they weren't going to be able to complete that task on time, they switch to instead disabling the weapons system of the station. Rom was successful at disabling the weapons mere seconds after they fire the weapons, destroying the minefield. While they were unable to save the minefield, this did leave the station without weapons so that the Defiant could enter the wormhole without resistance from the station. In this rewritten version, Rom and his co-conspirators will continue to work on bringing down the anti-graviton beam. They will not switch tasks to bringing down the weapons, and instead, they'll continue to focus on the anti-graviton beam, bringing it down just seconds too late, as the station's weapons will be occupied because of the Federation and Klingon ships while the mines are taken down. Sisko orders the Defiant into the wormhole without hesitation. When he does, General Martok insists on joining Sisko in glorious battle to stop the reinforcements. Sisko tells Martok that he needs to retake Deep Space Nine and that Sisko will deal with the reinforcements. Martok nods, says "Kapla," and ends the communication. This is where, in the original version of the episode, I think Sisko shows his largest lack of faith, and I found this the most disappointing. In the original, Sisko orders the Defiant to go to full battle readiness and prepare for combat.
Full stop. Chief, divert all power to forward shields and weapons. Lock phasers. Prepare to launch quantum torpedoes.
And then Sisko is whisked away to the Celestial Temple, where he confronts the Prophets. During this conversation with the Prophets, he sounds very convinced that he simply wants to fight the Dominion ships with whatever abilities he has at his and whatever weapons he has at his disposal, and he is willing to die in order to protect the Alpha Quadrant.
Why have you brought me here?
There are always questions.
I didn't ask to come here.
You seek to shed your corporeal existence.
I don't want to die, but I have to do everything I can to prevent the Dominion from conquering the Alpha Quadrant. If that means sacrificing my life and the life of my crew, so be it.
And it is only when the Prophets state that they were not okay with the game ending, and Sisko understanding that what they mean is they are not okay with his life coming to an end, that Sisko suggests that the Prophets actually intervene.
Now send me back to my ship. This isn't what I meant.
You are the Sisko.
I am also a Starfleet captain. I have a job to do, and I intend to do it. You want to interfere? Then interfere. Do something about those Dominion reinforcements.
After this conversation with the Prophets, he reappears on the Defiant Bridge, and again, he orders the crew to prepare for combat. He tells them to make every shot count, and then, unexpectedly, the Dominion ships disappear.
Phaser banks fully charged.
Forward shields at 100%.
Torpedoes ready. Targets locked.
Here they come.
Fire on my command. Steady, people. Make every shot count.
Benjamin.
I've had friends argue that Sisko knew all along that the Prophets were going to intervene, that he simply manipulated the Prophets into acting. And I'm sorry, but Sisko at no point in time showed that he had even the slightest bit of faith in the Prophets. He never indicated whatsoever, by action or by word, that he believed that the Prophets were going to act, even after the Prophets stated they were going to act in their own cryptic way. He made it perfectly clear that he was ready and in fact fully expecting to sacrifice his life, his ship, and his crew to defend the Alpha Quadrant, and that he believed that he was going to make this sacrifice right up to the moment that the Dominion fleet disappeared. There is not one line of dialogue nor action to indicate a moment of faith. That needs to change. So, how would I rewrite this particular sequence of events? I think this is actually fairly straightforward. We make Sisko into the man of faith that we all believed that he was. When the Defiant enters the wormhole, rather than ordering full battle readiness, Sisko simply orders to hold position.
Full stop.
Dax reports that she can detect multiple warp signatures ahead. Sisko insists once again that they simply hold position. O'Brien comes back with, "Sir, we don't have a whole lot of quantum torpedoes left." Echoing a line from Major Kira from the very first episode, he says, "We're not going to win this battle with torpedoes, Chief." O'Brien smiles. Then, Sisko is whisked to the Celestial Temple. This time, the conversation starts a bit differently with the prophets than in the original release. The Sisko has returned. Yes, it is time. Time for the prophets to act. To act? To save Bajor. We are of Bajor. Yes, and you've chosen me to be the emissary, to be the one who acts within time, so that you know when you must act to save Bajor. We must act to save Bajor? The Sisko is corporeal. That is why I'm here, as a corporeal being. Now is when I must act to appeal to you. The Sisko is belligerent. I am frustrated. It can be difficult to explain. Many will die if you do not act now. This is the Sisko's paw. We will act now. And the Sisko is then returned to the bridge of the Defiant. The crew of the Defiant looks to Sisko for his next order, and he calmly states to stand down from Red Alert and to prepare to make for Deep Space Nine. Of course, at first they think he's nuts. Then the Dominion fleet disappears. This time, though, when Garrick asks where the ships went, it is Dax that says, "Wherever they went, I don't think they're coming back." And Sisko simply nods, and Dax sets a course for Deep Space Nine. With the changes outlined in this video, we do not change the outcome of the event, but rather just the attitude of Sisko going into and coming out of the event. In my opinion, for the better. We go from a man who feels hopeless about understanding the prophets to straight up prepared for suicide, even to the point of where he would tell the prophets themselves to let him go back to his ship so that he could die before asking him for help. Then, after witnessing a miracle from them, he still has the slightest hint of doubt in his tone by saying, "Whatever happened to those ships?" when he knows exactly what happened to those ships, considering he just asked the prophets to intervene. His crew was scrambling around trying to prepare for battle. Would it not make sense at that point for him to put them at ease and let them know that the prophets had taken care of them? But he doesn't. In our version, we have a calm, collected Sisko who understands what the prophets did and who puts his crew at ease. And when they go back, he can put the rest of Bajor at ease, knowing that the emissary of the prophets has spoken to the prophets and that Bajor is safe. In the next and final part of this series, I will look at some of the consequences to the rest of Deep Space Nine if these changes were made to Sacrifice of Angels. I hope you've been enjoying this so far, and take care. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please click that thumbs up button and tell a friend so we can beat that algorithm. Leave me a comment if you can think of a great way for me to improve my content. And hey, if you really like what you see, consider going on over to patreon.com and lending us a hand. Every little bit helps. Remember, you are the salt of the earth, but I am the salty trekker. Take care.